Okay, so I'll start with we talk a lot about pipeline coverage and lead volume as proxies for marketing health, but conversion tells a different story. Across organizations, even one with mature demand programs, MQL to SQL, rates often hover far below expectations. So, Edward, what do you think are the most common reasons that leads fails to convert?
That's a good question. So it comes down to alignment between the process alignment between the problem. For me, the number one conversion killer is the sales and marketing alignment, what we consider a qualified lead. So what is going to be both parties coming together to think about what is our MQL definition. If it doesn't match what sales considers worth pursuing, then we're just generating volume that goes nowhere. So for me, the second is going to be the scoring model decay. So if we're trying to recalibrate against closed won data quarterly, the model is shifting, or sorry, drifting. So I'm thinking that there's a routine latency problem that we have when leads are sitting more than 24 hours, 48 hours due to manual routine gaps. So I like to try and find ways to speed the lead, which is nice to have. So it's all about CRM hygiene. You've got to make sure you've got no duplicates, stale contacts, missing enrichment. If sales can't trust the data, they won't pursue the lead.
Well said, Edward. Hemi, from your experience, where do you think the deepest misalignments tend to sit?
Well, I think that in general, marketing and sales tend to be more misaligned than we think. So there are misalignments throughout. But in particular, the journey of the funnel between MQL and SQL is a place where we see very big disconnects. What is a good MQL for marketing might not necessarily be what sales considers a good MQL. And same for SQLs. And that is kind of the connection point of the gears. If that is broken, your whole funnel is going to be kind of broken. So I would advise to start by solving that and solving those alignment issues, defining what is an MQL, what is an SQL for both parties, and coming to a common understanding that both parties can, let's say, sign on to.
So the problem is really one thing. It's a combination of misaligned definitions, weak handoffs, and processes that were never stress tested at scale.
Yeah,
So
I
once
think that the reason for that is that we make these definitions in a vacuum, or normally these definitions are made in a vacuum. And I think that you will agree with me that a better way to do this is to start from the data. Look at what we have already, and then construct those definitions from the data.
Mhm.
I,
So
I
once
also
team
suggest, I was going to say, I
sure.
suggest a steering group where you look at the numbers, right, with maybe the BDR leader to make sure that marketing is sending quality, and which ones are being quickly junked or disqualified to make sure that at least do you double click on some certain sources. So having that regular cadence with the sales is paramount.
Yeah, that's well said. And once team accepts that something is broken, the harder question is where exactly? Funnel data can be noisy and different stakeholders often point to different stages. So, Hemi, how can marketers systematically identify where the breakdown is happening?
I will start again from looking at data. And one data point that will jump out of the page very quickly is consistency of rates across the funnel. If you have very big jumps up or down or deviations from the expected in conversion rates, it typically indicates that something is broken there. And when I mean deviations, I don't mean only just kind of down, that suddenly, you have a good conversion from MQL to SQL and then it drops, but also the other way around. If you have an abnormally high conversion rate, you're probably leaving money on the table. That means that you are qualifying out some people that would otherwise, one out of 10 of those would convert. So look at the consistency of rates throughout the funnel. Look at what good benchmarks are. In many of these rates, for a B2B company, a good rate is anywhere between 15 and 25%, and plot those and see, do these kind of agree with each other? Do they, when you multiply them, do they lead to a coherent picture from prospect to closed one? And if not, look at those that show the biggest deviations first.
Pinpointing the root cause is really straightforward. So, Edward, from an operations standpoint, which signals in the data tend to surface the real problem fastest?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on what Jamie just said, you start looking at the conversion numbers is what I like to do. If especially when I'm looking at MQL to SAL, like this is where the BDRs are or SDRs are accepting the MQLs and markets sent over. How long are they sitting there without being accepted and moving further, right? Looking at sales accepted lead to sales qualified lead, how long does that sit there? And have we not established an SLA guidance for the teams, so that or we have a problem with the data? So I tend to look at the low MQL to SAL. That's a qualifying problem. I tend to follow up with discovery issues with the sales side to SQL to opportunity if they're tanking. Again, looking at the data and seeing the conversion rates and bring in the sales organization so we can actually take a look at some of the samples, because they can sit there and not being accepted. And this is why we want to make sure that they are being accepted, or tell marketing why they're not being accepted, so they don't stay there. Also looking at time decay within the stage itself. If leads stay in a particular stage for too long, they're not moving forward, they're not moving back to marketing. And then we start having bloat in your business intelligence, and like people start looking and say, why we got all these MQLs? We've got huge numbers. No, they're from last month, right? They haven't moved forward. So you got to look at all these sort of elements. And there's a lot of technology there that helps you with that and have alerts, and especially with Marketo.
Yep,
I completely
that's
agree with Edward here. Look at your funnel like you would look at cash. It's working capital. If you have things that are accumulating on a shelf, they go stale and they go stale relatively quickly. So you have to process them and minimize the amount of them that are kind of in flight. Also,
and And I think they inflate the stats also, like the MQL stats, like marketing for marketing MQLs are like strong points, and for sales it's say SAL. So like marketing says like, hey, means like we have provided you like 50 leads, like where are they? And sales says no, they are of not value, but like they are not like changing them. Yes, stages are important. And I think that the visibility into data is exactly what sets up the next challenge. Diagnosis without action just produces better documented problems. So let's talk about solutions, specifically when automation is involved in the picture. So, Edward, how does marketing automation bridge the gap between lead generation and conversion?
Yeah, so the automation part, the real value isn't sending more emails, right? It's really creating a connective layer between demand gen and the sales workflow. So nothing tends to fall through the cracks. So an example, in our Marketo instance, we handle behavior scoring in real time. So when a prospect hits its threshold, for example, attends a webinar or visits pricing page, or it downloads some white papers within the week, we've got these automations triggering that automated MQL transition. So that combination between behavior score and demographic, behavior score is who wants to do business with us. Demographic scoring tells us who we want to do business with. And that combination, coming to that decision about what is your MQL threshold, automation will take care of all of that. And then, of course, it transitions to the BDRs and Salesforce by, like things like territory and segment. It fires an alert. Certain ones you can send off all these automated emails to alert certain sales leaders. So that's the beauty of the automation.
Yeah, those are some important considerations. Hemi, so are there like specific points in the funnel where you have seen automation create the most immediate impact?
the most immediate impact. I think there are two, maybe not parts of the funnel, but two aspects where automation creates a massive impact. First, scale. It can do things at scale that a human wouldn't be able to, or you would need an enormous sales organization that wouldn't, or marketing organization wouldn't pay for itself.
Mhm.
Marketing automation allows you to scale out and kind of reach a lot more people with pretty well personalized messages. And the second part is it can do things that a human wouldn't be able to do. Um, for example, attribution or scoring. There is no way that a human would look at 300,000 prospects and calculate like a score or like Shapley value, weighted Shapley value for each of them. So you can do more, but also do deeper and better things that a human wouldn't do. And that's how I think we should look at automation. It doesn't just kind of multiply my efforts, it allows me to do more impactful things.
Yeah, clearly we can see like automation is doing more than speeding up manual tasks.
Yeah.
It's actually reshaping where human judgment has the most business impact. So, and Hemi, as you mentioned, like there are dozens of moving part across a typical lead management workflow. Which part do you think can benefit most from marketing automation?
Routing is a classic example. This is something that we discussed in our preparation for the webinar. Um, you can set up very intelligent routing and very timely routing with automation. You can ensure that a lead that shows high intent and is demographically fit gets followed up on by a human who
Yeah.
knows what they're talking about within 15 minutes. That is massive. That gives the seller a great advantage, but gives the buyer a really, really good customer experience. So this kind of intelligent routing is definitely a big part. And then segmentation and nurturing, which go hand in hand, you're able to infer very efficiently what a person wants or needs to hear to progress in the purchase process based on signals, what they have read, what they haven't read, etc., their score, their behavior data, and you can feed them exactly the right personalized content that will address their pain points. So my two picks here are intelligent, timely routing
Mhm.
and clever, timely content.
Yeah, and means everybody wants to be like contacted right away. Nobody is going to like wait for you to like respond in a in a day and saying like, hey, yeah, we got your message. And that can like break that the communication. So
Mhm.
Edward, what are your thoughts on this? Like where does automation tend to create the most leverage for marketing teams?
Yeah. So it's really getting away from a lot of manual work where you can let the automation handle based on the lead routing from rules-based assignments to geography, the segments or account ownership. This is all before automation. Leads were getting manually triaged, so we tried to remove all that and try to have a new inbound process. We tend to have leads going when they become MQL, they automatically go get routed to the BDR. They will get an alert as well, so they get more noise coming to them about go handle the new MQLs. Obviously, follow-up tasks we trigger as well for certain trial downloads. That's a good one. So that we create the automation of tasks in our CRM for the owner to go follow up as well. We also have things like behavioral-based segmentation, so it dynamically routes leads into nurture tracks based on their engagement patterns. So it replaces a lot of static list management. The lifecycle transitions as well, moving leads between stages based on their score thresholds and sales acceptance. It should never be manual. This is all taken care of automation. So there's the as Jamie said, like 300,000 prospects. Like you want to have the automation do things for you, put people in front of the BDRs, or go back to nurturing, or continue to put into paths based on their interests. So you have all these automation triggers firing off.
Yeah, so the gains are real, like, but only when the underlying data feeding those automated systems is sound. And that
Yes.
brings us to scoring, which is where a lot
Mm.
of that data quality gets tested. So lead scoring is one of those things that looks elegant in a diagram, but gets messy in practice. Many teams score either based on gut feel or inherit a model they don't fully understand. So, Hemi, you have emphasized leading like from data from the start. What does building a scoring model from the ground up actually look like?
It's a really good question, and it's something I have thought about a lot, and I mean more than it's probably healthy for a normal human to do, resulting in one of the features of database scoring in Salesforce. I was involved in building that as an alpha customer.
Mm-hmm.
And what it takes is looking at a lot of data and starting to kind of cut and slice your data through different lenses. For example, um, you want to set a threshold for what is an MQL. Instead of just starting from a blank sheet of paper and thinking, okay, I think that maybe 50 points is good for an MQL, or if they attend a webinar, look at the whole distribution of your score. Think like a data scientist or a statistician and start to these sense. What do the top 10% of my leads look like? What do they have in common? How do they cluster? What are things that I can correlate between a person doing this and then becoming a sales accepted lead? And start doing it from those data points instead of your own assumptions. Normally, the data does reinforce our feelings and our understanding of the business, but it also tells a whole lot of other set of stories that we don't catch on. For example, in one of the companies I used to work for, there was one particular white paper that nobody really thought much about, but it was extremely correlated with a buyer not converting. And we thought that this was a little bit weird, but the more we looked at it, the more cases we found of, okay, people who read this in the process basically drop off. Okay, so then we have to do two things. One, set this as a negative score point, and two, find out through customer interviews, sales interviews, why. And turns out that we did find an explanation. There was a rational reason why people did that. So by looking at the data, we both made our model reflect the reality and fixed a content asset that was being detrimental.
Yeah, that's quite insightful. So, Edward, how do you validate that scoring model that we just discussed? And at what point do you think, or do you know it needs a rethinking?
Yeah, so when I tend to join companies, they either already have market automation and it's like refreshing everything. But I tend when it comes to score models, I tend to start with closed won deals and sort of reverse engineer the pattern, if that makes sense. I want to try and find out what those contacts look like demographically, right? Because I want to marry that up with the company's ideal customer profile. So I want to see what behaviors they exhibited before being converted, and that starts my baseline. I tend to build, obviously two parallels dimensions, which is your demographic scoring, captures your fit, title, company size, revenue size, industry, even a technical stack layer. With the behavior scoring, we try to capture the intent from the web visits and downloads, email engagement, so forth. And then another layer is third-party intent signals from other providers, like Sixth Sense and stuff. Of course, you use first party with Marketo. Then the high fit is the active buying signals, is far more valuable than a single asset download. So you'll tend to have these auto MQLs elements in there, but you build up a picture of what from the last, I tend to do the last 2 years of closed won, helps me build a picture to then start working with a score model. But I also you've got to include negative scoring in that model as well. No engagement potentially in the last 90 days, you start to decay in the score. Unsubscribes or bounces, you deduct the points to zero in the behavior element. This will keep the MQL pool from filling up with stale leads that kind of waste a lot of the sales capacity. And then with the setting the MQL threshold is you have to work collaboratively with the BDRs, the sales team, and review quarterly against actual conversion data so that the model is never done. If I want to be clear, it is a living, breathing beast, right? So you've always constantly got to monitor it. But that's how I try to approach it. Reverse engineer, look at a sample size, a good sample size, close won opportunities, look at the accounts, look at the contacts, what journeys did they take, right? And you build up the picture there and start working backwards.
Yeah, and
And
now
I think
that's something
involvement is the
to,
key. Yep, Amy, go ahead.
yeah, so that now we have tools that didn't exist 5 years ago that allow you to make sense of data in a much more accessible way. So for a lot of the people who are listening today, you can literally like anonymize a lot of this data, throw it into a LLM and tell it to find patterns or find clusters or find triggers, uh, emphasizing the anonymizing part. But you have the luxury of being able to build good models to start and be able to refine them. As Edward said, they're never done in a much better way and easier way than we had when we started building these things.
Yep. So I think we just like discussed about like the scoring part, like do like how exactly we should set the foundations and yes, like apart from the positive scoring, we have to like introduce the negative ones because we need to know like who who are those like people who are just like engaging for the first time and then like just going cold? Because we don't have to like waste time on those. We have to like re like evolve our like lead scoring in a way, or even like we can introduce like grading also, where we can grade our leads, and based on that we can like pass on and do like introduce nurtures. So so a well calibrated scoring model sets the foundation, but it only delivers value if the right actions follow quickly enough. Which brings me to my next point. Speed to lead is key. And we have discussed that like in the past, in the like previous discussions here. But yet delayed or inconsistent follow-ups continues to cost deals. So Edward, how do you structure automation to ensure high intent leads are acted on immediately?
Yeah, the accuracy and timeliness are the two sides of that same coin. I mean, on accuracy, automated scoring removes the sort of subjectively. Instead of a BDR eyeballing a lead, you have a numeric framework, right? So we tend to put on the with the score framework, we put in some numeric scores there with alpha numeric. So we have A1s, A2, A3, A4. So that
Mhm.
fits an intent against defined criteria. So when a lead crosses that MQL threshold, it's because it met a specific combination of signals, not just one and done, and it's not a gut feel. And on the timeliness, the moment the lead hits the threshold, the system transitions it, right? Assigns it via routing rules, notifies the BDR, creates a follow-up task. That entire workflow just takes a matter of seconds, not days. And the real-time score updates adds another layer. So if a prospect visits like a pricing page or requests a demo while in a nurture, the score spikes immediately and can trigger an escalation, pulling them out of the standard nurture path and fast tracking it to sales. So the key insight is, for me, automation doesn't replace the human judgment. It ensures the human judgment gets applied to the right leads at the right time with the right context.
That's a solid foundation. So, Hemi, Edward touched on the structural side of it. But from a scoring standpoint, what real-time triggers should be in place to keep qualification timely?
That's a great question. I think nowadays we can get a lot of web signals and conversion signals in a very kind of real-time manner, seconds, even below seconds. So those should always be, let's say, the final bullet that fires the automation. In the end, you want to have a message to sales or a handover to sales that is very quick, but also very complete. You don't want to misfire this and tell sales to call somebody before you have enough data or a profile on the person or what to tell them. So those timely conversion signals, let's say a Google or GA4 conversion signal sent by the marketing automation should be the defining trigger. But you have to set it up so that by then you have um, gather enough of a profile on the person, on their interest. A way to do this, for example, is progressive profiling on forums. And then most market automation platforms do this natively already, so that when a person has filled in multiple forms, every subsequent form, you don't ask the same questions. You ask like a new one and a new one and a new one. And that allows you to build like a more rounded 360 profile before you actually fire a conversion. When you fire the conversion, I am a little bit of a radical in this, but I understand that our job in marketing is to identify this extremely quickly. So the job of the BDR of sales is to act on it as quickly. It cannot be that the expectation on me and on Edward is to fire it within 5 seconds and then the BDR sits on it for 48 hours or 72 hours. Can't be. So there has to be an alert, if possible, in multiple channels, let's say Slack and a notification in the CRM for the BDR to act on them. And there has to be a system to keep track of whether the SLA of, let's say, 12 hours is violated or not. And then the targets and the OKRs of the BDR and mine have to be set so that we keep each other honest on the SLA.
Great perspectives there. And that said, the real opportunity is just in faster qualification. It's in what happens to leads that don't make the cut right away.
Yep.
Not every lead is ready when it enters the funnel. Some go cold, others pause, and the reason might have nothing to do with fit or interest. Hemi, how can automated nurturing help bring dormant leads back into motion?
That's a really interesting point and challenge. It's something that we often forget. We tend to focus a lot on those that convert and those that bring us money, and we forget those that kind of don't convert at first touch. A few points of advice here. I would say that there's also gold in there. Like one out of every 100 or every 50 that don't convert at first will buy in the end. So don't forget them. Don't let them leave them for dead. For example, you can build really good and effective awaken the dead or re-engagement campaigns by triggering on behavior, not just time. You can do the lazy way, 30 days inactive, fine. But you can also do things like, okay, a person who's been active, but then watches a pricing page. And if they're looking at a pricing page, probably you want to fast forward them and into right before qualification and make it very easy for them to requalify. That's the re-entry point. And you have to make it look like a conversation, not just a campaign. For example, that person who was unengaged for 2 months and then suddenly watches the or visits the pricing page again. I want to trigger a plain text email from a person, a real person. Real person. It's going to be sent by the marketing automation platform, but it will look like a email I typed on Gmail. That touches on exactly the pain point of that person. On why are they interested in pricing? How does this match to other solution? And I find that these plain text emails beat out HTML branded newsletters every time. They have already ignored the branding once or the template once. So you have to hit them with something that actually kind of makes them feel connected. And the last thing I do with this that you can automate at scale also is not change the volume. So they already ignored my product page once. So if I hit them with product page again, that's just more noise. But I'm going to normally change the value prop. I'll shift it to either like a benchmark, a peer story, a customer reference, something that is not by me again, but rather understanding why they re-engage, why they're now looking at pricing and offering them an alternative angle to buy.
Yep, that makes like quite relevant like things for everyone like who just joined us. And Edward, like from your perspective, like how should one structure recycling workflows so that code leads aren't just discarded but stay within the reach?
Yeah. So definitely cold leads aren't dead leads, as I like to say, and they do need a different approach. And the automation does help you run that at a large scale. So you, like most folks, they'll have a recycle sort of program, but when a lead is disqualified or goes dormant past 60 days, it enters like a re-engagement track that you can build, and that'll be different from your standard nurtures, right? It's because standard nurture is designed to establish relevance, but with a colder version, you tend to put them into a different track, and so you tend to work with content marketing, content strategy is what matters here. So you won't re-engage someone with the same white paper they already downloaded 3 months ago. So you want to map re-engagement content to prior interaction history. And what I tend to do is if they engaged with like a particular piece of content, you want to surface the new research for that or customer stories for that category. So you're trying to build additional interests for that prospect to probably touch upon. So also, behavioral trigger serves as an exit criteria. The moment a recycle lead takes high intent action, they'll get pulled out, rescored, and potentially requalified. So one tactic I don't treat all cold leads the same. I segment by how far they got before becoming cold. Someone who reacted or reached a sales accepted lead stage would need a different re-engagement play than someone who grabbed one asset and went silent. So I tend to have the standard nurture for people who are actively engaged at the moment, but when they start to go stale, based on the history, you run segmentations in your market automation platform to see who got as far as, and then look at what content they received. So you can probably potentially put them down different tracks, especially if your sales organization push them back to nurture. Why are you pushing them back? So obviously they're not ready to buy yet, but or did you get further and there was some sort of budget constraints, time constraints? the needs, the BANT sort of qualification, those can help you build additional nurture tracks for longer stale cold leads, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's like all correct, like, and I think re-engagement works best when it's relevant. But this is really a personalization problem at its core, which brings me to my next question. Personalization consistently shows up a conversion lever, but scaling it operationally is a challenge. Tailoring experiences by persona, industry, or prior behavior often requires managing dozens of sequences together. So, Edward, how can marketing automation help with that?
Yeah. So personalization is difference between the generic nurture that gets ignored and a relevant touch point that moves someone forward. So, but personalization doesn't scale if it's just a good idea that never ships. So automation makes it more automation makes it more operational because we can have dynamic content that for one application I use is Marketo. They have dynamic content that tailors email copy. So the call to actions, landing pages, based on the industry role, engagement history, they can all make changes to their path for that particular prospect at the lead level and the account level. So that kind of helps as well. On the website, we're rolling out a piece of software that can serve up different content experiences based on the visitor's identity and intent signal. So we can, based on the revenue size of a particular industry of an account, we can then serve up different pieces of content. So that truly helps personalize that experience. And they'll see content that tends to be relevant to their use case. So that's what we're trying to throw up. So we build the rules once. If the role is X and industry is Y and stage is Z, we'll serve variant A, that makes sense. And the system executes across every touch point. So I think it's very, very important to start personalizing and not be very generic. So when teams go wrong in trying to personalize everything at once, they start with high impact moments. They first nurture email, the demo, follow up, and then pricing page. Even basic segmentation by industry and role can dramatically outperform batch and blast. So I do think personalization is key, and it's when it's done right, you can quite scale quite quickly and have many, many different paths running at the same time by automation.
And yes, definitely, like it's automation, like which handles the delivery, and the structure underneath still needs to be sound. And as means from the start, like Hemi mentioned about the data qualities and the data means if you don't have the data, you don't know your customer or the prospect, and you will like face challenges in doing personalization for them because you need to know uh, how you want to personalize. You want to personalize based on their interest or based out on their like industry. So there, like you need to know like their like demographic or their behaviors, and then only like you know them better and like you can personalize the content for them or the experience that they want. Like means I I would like rather can like move a email to spam which says like hi there or just hi instead of hi Arun means and I can like say it's like to you, and also like nobody wants like you to like not knowing and somehow like sending you an email just saying like hey hi I have an offer, okay we do something and you might be interested in it. So means I would like rather put that email in spam. So, Hemi, what does effective personalization look like structurally? Like, how do you keep it consistent across a complex funnel?
It's tricky, it takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. And I think what you said, it's exactly right, that personalization without relevance is just spam. So we have to go beyond that. And the way to go beyond that, in my opinion, is to automate the context and the whole content, not just the tokens, first name, last name, company, whatever. Use some behavioral data to cluster your people, segment them into 4, 5, 6, 7 different groups of what is the problem they're trying to solve, or where are they in the problem, and then serve a different version of your email to the people depending on what the problem they're trying to solve. You often have behavioral data to tell you this, like where are they located? What's their job title? What's their persona? How far are they in the funnel? And if you put a little bit of effort and a couple of people on this, you will get to notably different versions of the content. Um, Somebody who is researching competitors is going to get a content that indexes on differentiation, why you're different than the others. Somebody who's looking at pricing is going to get a content about value. Somebody who is segmented as a financial persona is going to get like a time to value or an ROI kind of content. It doesn't need to be radically different, but it needs to speak to their problem. And I would add one thing here that, we invest time and effort into this. We all get a bit enamored with the content we create. It's worth testing it, whether does it actually perform better, worse, or the same than a generic email. And we always leave a control group in our personalized emails for people who just get a very generic one. And with that, we often find that, okay, we produce 7 variants, but only 3 of them did better than the generic. So maybe we don't need 7 variants, and maybe these are the things that is worth personalizing on. So be a bit ruthless, kill your darlings, let data tell you what actually works.
All of these are great points, but they can only compound in value if teams can measure what actually working. And before I go ahead, like on my next questions, means there are like some good like questions I see like in the Q&A, and I think they are like based on the topics that we just discussed. Like, so I wanted to like pick like couple of like the questions, and Edward and Hemi, if you can like shed a light. So the first question I see is like, when you see a drop in MQL to SQL conversion, how do you determine if the issue is with the lead quality or sales follow-up? Edward.
Oh, it's very difficult.
Oh, Amy,
Um,
you go ahead.
Sorry, no, Edward, go for it. I'm
Oh,
just
sorry.
gonna get
Yeah,
my popcorn.
so the question was when you see a drop from MQL to SAL,
SQL.
is that right? Yeah,
SQL.
Oh, SQL. So that's jumping over a couple of things. So if it's a drop, yeah, you got to try and look at some of the samples and start reverse engineer it. Look at the transaction histories. I tend to look at if if marketing pushed over as MQL and then the BDRs accepted them, then and they're fine. And they did it within the SLA adherence, sort of 24 hours. Every couple's different. Could be 15 minutes, right? But and if they're good there, then move on to the next one. What's the next stage? The next stage is from the BDR to the AE. And what does their handover look like? Was there any SLA infringements? Did it
Mm-hmm.
take long within a certain time frame because the AEs are not accepting what the BDRs hand over, things like that. So I tend to look at the transaction history, and I tend to look at the first I look at the conversions, and I'll be alerted to the fact that okay, we have a drop, and start reverse engineering. Look at some sample data. All right, if you've got a good BI system, you should be able to pick out some of the records that are showing the drop in conversion, and just start going to Salesforce, maybe your market automation platform, combination of both, just to see what's going on.
Yep. And Amy, what's your thought on this?
I think everything that Edward said was like right on point. And that's kind of, those are the tools that we have most of the time to look manually, inspect with a microscope, whether these leads were handled in time, whether handled properly, etc., etc. Um, if that fails, which doesn't often happen, but if you have enough volume of leads, you can get to a point where like, okay, I have to inspect manually 500 MQLs. Can't possibly do that. One tool that helps here or has helped me in the past are discontinuity analysis. It's something that is borrowed from behavioral economics. You've seen like poverty research. It's super valuable tool. And what you do is basically, let's say that your threshold for becoming MQL is 100 points. And then you look at like, okay, how do the people who barely became an MQL, let's say they have 101 to 105 points, how do they do in conversion compared to the ones who did like 95 to 100 and were barely below the threshold? This
Mm-hmm.
should be fairly similar because the threshold is kind of arbitrary. Do they perform meaningfully different? If they do, then kind of, well, your threshold is in the right place and the problem is somewhere else, probably sales follow-up or timeliness. If they don't perform differently, your threshold is wrong. And you should set it somewhere else because these people either should all qualify or none of them qualify. So they're equally good or equally bad.
Mm-hmm. So And I think another question like which like I think might be relevant with our like scoring techniques. So there's like another question which says like, can you share an example of how real-time scoring or triggers have directly improved conversion rates? Hemi, if you can take on this.
I wish I had one. For like real-time scoring that is the cause for better conversion rates.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to pick like anecdotes, and those would be cases where like the time between the conversion to MQL and to SQL is less than an hour. In
Mhm.
every year, we have a few of those, and those reflect that we were able to make the match to MQL very quickly, give the alert to the SDR very quickly, and the SDR did pick up the phone and call them within the hour and call and had a disco call. So when you can show those, and you have a handful of them, you know that those people would not have qualified without like real-time signals and without the
Yeah.
SLA. So they are enough to justify the impact of having a well-oiled machine, well-built machine, real-time machine.
Got it. Edward, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great answer there, Jamie, as well. And it's also looking at when real-time scoring generates an MQL, you're going to make sure that within that certain time frame, the BDR, SDR are accepting that
Mm-hmm.
MQL, and then once they've accepted it, they move into the next stage. But then we're trying to, because there's a time before they actually reach out to that MQL. So you've got to give the BDR some time, and that time will differ from each company. But the main thing is looking at activity by the BDR or SDR on that MQL or SAL now. It's now a sales accepted lead. They've accepted it. Now they're going to actively work it. So they have a certain time frame, an SLA sort of window where we want to start seeing activity on the Salesforce or the CRM to see, okay, they've sent an email, like an outreach sequence, or they've tried to make a call. I mean, so if it's high intent, you got to make a call. So you make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing based on the SLA, and you run reports and dashboards to make sure that SELs are being followed up in activity. And of course, once a certain period of time elapses, then we automatically put them back to nurture because they haven't moved forward. They haven't been, the BDR didn't hand it over to the AE, if that makes sense. And before that happens, in uh, my more recent roles, there has to be a call, a discovery call with the BDR and the prospect to establish what they're looking for. And then there'll be a meeting set up between that prospect and the AE to take it forward. And that'll be a handover process. So we're measuring those to make sure that there is activity on the record from the BDR to then, of course, hand over to the AE. So that whole combination is triggered based on score, right? Starts off with the scoring, and then you're monitoring the conversions across each stage and see if there's any drop as well, and making sure that the SLAs that we set up with each department are being followed through.
Great. So I think now let's shift back to our like means we discussed about scoring, we discussed about personalization. So I think now I feel it's the perfect time to shift gears to reporting. Measurement is where many teams either gain clarity or lose direction. So Hemi, which metrics should marketer prioritize to assess their lead management automation?
I'm gonna leave a few for Edward as well, but like my favorite ones to start from are conversion rates by lead source and by score band, how people with who are barely MQLs versus very solid MQLs convert, and by
Mhm.
source. Source is an important kind of part of this because it will help you allocate your effort and your investments per different channel. Um, Another one that makes a big difference for us is pipeline velocity. How fast do leads move between stages? And if you invest in automation, you can probably increase the pipeline volume, but also the velocity, that things do convert faster, meaning you can move more leads through in any given financial year. And then last but not least, the king of them all, in my opinion, sales acceptance rate. How many MQLs become SALs and are actually worked by sales? This is not just a systems problem, it's a human problem as well. And you have to, let's say, negotiate and build a solid framework with your sales org so that they feel comfortable working those leads and knowing that only 1 out of 5 is going to close win, but they're all worth working.
So the metrics are only as useful as what they tie to. So Ed, how do you
Yeah.
ensure the metrics team track are actually connected to revenue outcomes?
Well, it's a good one, yeah, because I look at a few categories, the velocity and the conversion, efficiency, and of course the revenue alignment, right? So with the velocity, I'm looking at time to first contact and time and stage. Looking at the average MQL to SEL time is creeping up, and that could be an early warning sign. The conversion rates between stages, MQL to SEL, SEL to SQL, and so forth, and closed one. They're tracked independently, and like a healthy MQL to SQL rate with maybe poor SQL to op means that we're qualifying well, but we're targeting the wrong accounts. So that's why I look at the efficiency about the duplication rate and routing accuracy, SLA adherence. I mean, these tell our systems that they're running clean and or creating overhead. And then revenue alignment, the percentage of closed won pipe that marked in source, to touch upon what Jamie says, we're always going to look at the sources, what was influenced, and we try to use some technology that helps us with that. And then, of course, the clear view of which campaigns and nurtures contributed to the revenue aspect, that multi-touch. So one source, multiple sources, the last source. So the mistake I see in teams make is they tracking activity or vanity metrics, right? Email sent, clicks, and opens as success indicators, but those are diagnostic, not strategic. Your CMO or your CRO, they don't care about that type of metrics. They care about pipeline and revenue, not open rates.
Yeah, that really frames it well. Measurement isn't just a reporting exercise, it what keeps the entire system honest over time.
Yeah.
This naturally raises the question of longevity. Before we wrap up, I would like to touch base on the sustainability of marketing automation. As market shifts, buying behavior evolve, and scoring models drift, what does a sustainable optimization cadence look like? Ed.
Good question. So optimization is a discipline. It's not a project. So you do need cadence and a framework. So quarterly marketing and sales alignment reviews help. So you evaluate the scoring thresholds. You don't want to make changes to your score model every month. You need time to collect data so you can evaluate. So quarterly check-ins is good. Making sure the MQL definitions are still relevant today than it was 3 months ago. That type of stuff. We tend to do a lot of A/B testing as well, sequencing and continuously, but test with intent, and we don't just optimize open rates and measure which variants drive downstream conversions. The score model refinement on a regular cycle, you pull in closed won and closed lost cohorts, trying to analyze which attributes correlate with outcomes, and we try to make some adjustments, weights accordingly based on having our quarterly QBRs. Monthly lifecycle stage performance reviews as well. We identify where drop off is increasing and trace it to the root cause. Could be a process gap or data quality issue or campaign problem. We tend to invest that investment in your data foundation. None of this works if the CRM is full of duplicates and stale records. So ongoing deduplication and enrichment workflows are the prerequisite for every optimization initiative, I think.
Yep, appreciate your thoughts on this, Edward. Amy, how do you keep systems calibrated as the business scales and buyer behavior changes?
I'll start with the technical part of it. Audit your sequences, audit your flows and nurturing paths against the actual conversion paths. There is a ton of value in just talking to a customer and saying, hey, how did you decide to buy from us? What did you see? And then kind of compare that to what you see in your CRM or marketing automation platform and audit that the path makes sense. Is this a path you knew, a path you didn't know? Can you adjust your systems to make it more seamless? Map which content appears in deals that close. And if there are things that never show up in winning paths, probably you want to kill those, not worth maintaining. The second part is the maintenance, or let's say recycling part. You have to let underperforming campaigns die. Not everything is worth doing, worth maintaining. Most teams, including mine, We keep adding workflows, actions, automation rules, whatever, and never retire anything. Set a review cadence every quarter, every year, where you have to justify what you keep and what you drop. If things don't show results in 90 days, 180 days, pause them. And the last part, I think the most important one, is the human element. Close the loop between the feedback you get from sales and from customers and your scoring and your sequences. If sales doesn't understand why you're qualifying things, if they keep rejecting leads, then you need to fix that. So also put a placeholder in the calendar, regular feedback cycle with sales, with customer success, where you go through these flows and they understand what this does and why, and you make any necessary changes.
So it's all about like the coalition between like both marketing and sales teams that like can like means bring more revenue and like success to both teams.
Yeah.
So from scoring models to optimization cadences, we have covered the full arc of what it takes to build a funnel that actually converts. That brings us to the end of our session. And I would like now to take up like few more questions, and they are very good questions like in the pipeline for you guys. So the first one is, it's related to like the current timeline where like AI has like a more impact. So the question is like, with the rise of predictive tools, should we still be spending time building manual rule-based lead scoring models, or is it time to move entirely to AI-driven scoring?
Oh, that
Spicy.
that is a great question. So I mean, obviously until these platforms offer some of this, because obviously for my being in the game for such a long time, it is manual in a sense, right? You first have to build it, and it can be built in so many different ways from each different platform. But once you have but you still need a framework, and then you want to operationalize that even more. So you're still going to think manual in a sense, like reverse engineer. You got to think of the bigger picture, and then you can have AI remove some of the mundane stuff as well. So, like, even though you put together a whole scoring model and framework and you start collecting data and leads are moving through the funnel, the AI could then pull out and give you more information about trends. You could see that if there's sticking points. So instead of manually having to analyze, reverse engineer each lead that shows potentially a problem in the funnel, right? The AI can help with that and get there faster. So you don't have to spend days trying to figure out why, somewhere in the pipeline is becoming problematic, whether it be sourcing somewhere. AI can help you with that. So there's loads of things that AI can do, and we're just on the cusp of it. And a lot of it comes down to which companies allow you to have AI in-house, because you're dealing with
Yeah.
personal information, right? PII data. So
AI data. Yeah.
exactly. So it either the company you're subscribing to that provides your market automation has ways to do that, or you pull it out into your own enterprise AI account that your employees have and work with the PII data, right? So there's these are the cautionary tale I've got to warn about.
It's chicken and egg solution
Yeah.
problem, and no one. So they says like, yes, we can secure your data, but like, yeah, PII is like a big game. So Amy, any thoughts of yours in this?
Yeah, be very careful with PII. That's kind of the warning number one. It is legally protected in many countries for a reason. You don't want to run afoul of that, or even worse, you don't want to kind of disrespect the trust that your customer places on you. So anonymize it, pseudonymize it, never kind of feed it somewhere that you don't have full control on. To give you an example, I have a colleague who works in our parent organization, who's one of the largest companies in the world. And this person responsible for global marketing, she cannot see the PII in the CRM of any single customer. They will only be able to view pseudonymous or anonymous data. That's how seriously companies take it and how seriously we need to take it as well. And then going back to what Ed said, AI will help you, sure, but don't outsource your thinking to AI. Outsource the doing, outsource the whatever, building a model, turning the parameters, but don't outsource your thinking. That's why you were hired, and that's what makes you unique.
That's like great. And I think we can take one more question and before we can wrap things up. So the question is like, it's again like for personalization part, like how do you ensure personalizations feels relevant without becoming too intrusive or overly complex?
That's very
Anybody want
tricky.
to go for a quick minute?
Um, well, I'm actually trying to put software in place now that's doing that. So it's one of those things where when you want to be relevant, right? So you should start with your like a content marketing matrix. So you have relevant content based on your personas and so forth, so that when someone does arrive at your site, you can serve a personalized experience. But the intrusive part is for me is more like I want to leave the page and then I have these pop-ups, trying to bring me back in and or do a survey and things like that. I find those intrusive. But if if I navigate a website and it's relevant because I arrived there and it already knows who I am, not necessarily personally, but from my account and potentially what I may be looking for, because I'm arriving at your website, I may have, I have a problem to fix, right? So what could be served up, and being served up content that serves my issue is great. But when I'm trying to navigate and I have bots trying to speak with me and or pop-ups trying to get me to fill out a survey while I'm just arrived is very intrusive. So you gotta mix that up a little bit differently.
This has been a deep, insightful discussion. Ed, Jamie, thank you. You covered a lot of ground today, and a clear thread ran through everything. Funnel failure is rarely a single point problem. Misaligned definitions, outdated scoring, disconnected data, they all compound. The good news is that the same compounding dynamic works in the other direction. Fix the definitions, build scoring on actual data, automate the right motions, and watch the improvement stack. To everyone who joined us today, thank you for your time. We hope you walk away with the at least one or two things you can act on. Stay tuned for more from Grazitti Interactive. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Until then, goodbye and take care.
Thanks
Hey,
everyone.
Thank you very much. It's been a
thank
pleasure
you.
being with you today.
Thanks
Thank you.
guys. Take
Yep.
care.